Okay, so this next video is rendering a sphere. As you can see here, I made a little smaller sphere, and I rendered it real quick as if a light source is coming from this direction. And you can kind of see right around here is the highlight. Right around here, around that circle are midtones. So if I have a circular form, or a sphere, around here is going to be your highlight. Here are going to be your midtones. And here, here are going to be your darker tones, right around here. And then underneath here is going to be your reflected light. And reflected light is light that hits the ground plane and then reflects back onto the form. And you can see right here is a little bit lighter of a value as compared to the darkest part, which is kind of right around here, which is somewhat of like a lima bean shape. So you can kind of see right there, it's like a lima bean shape. And then also the shadow, the cast shadow that it creates, which is darker underneath of the sphere, which kind of helps you create that reflected light, because you need a nice hard edge underneath of it, so you can kind of create that edge. If this is close to that value, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between the sphere and the shadow itself. Now the next thing I want to point out is the these two guys up here. I just want to show you that this is how I created the ellipse. So you can kind of see this ellipse is designed within these rectangles, which I divided in half vertically and also horizontally. I made two of them because I just wanted to show you what I'm going to do to one of them, and you can kind of see where it came from, and then I'll apply it down here. But basically I'm making an ellipse, and the ellipse is an arc at the very top, and I go over this with some of my other videos. An arc at the bottom, a very subtle arc. Here on the far left is a little tiny baby arc, and on the right is a little tiny arc as well. And then I just somewhat kind of connect these arcs, and you adjust the edge a little bit. And the reason why it's broken down into quadrants is it's easier for you to make sure each quadrant is equivalent to one another, because that's basically what an ellipse is. It's symmetrical on both sides, top and bottom. And if there's a little area that looks off or whatever, then you can make an adjustment. So an ellipse is constantly turning, constantly curving. It never flatlines, it never points, never creates a point. It's constantly curving. So I'm just adjusting this. I pulled it out there. And then you can kind of take a peek at it. It's better if you have a really sharp pencil. You can clarify it and whatnot. So I'm just going to draw that same ellipse down here. And then I'll start to render the sphere. I don't have to be too perfect about the ellipse because it's going to be in shadow, and I can kind of blend the shadow out a little bit. And remember, what's behind the sphere there is going to be covered, so I don't really have to worry too much about that. So that's basically it right there. It's really easy to get in there. Constantly turning. So there you go. It's basically the same thing. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase what's inside the sphere, because every time you overlap something with graphite, it just gets darker and darker, and I want to have this area clean. What I'm going to do next, I'm just going to start applying value. Now, whenever I apply value, you want to hit the areas that that's going to be darkest first, and that is the darkest part here, where it's in shadow. Where the sphere starts to kind of bend towards the ground plane and it's out of the light. And you can kind of see it. I'm just turning my paper into different directions, and I'm overlapping through a series of cross hatching. And I will say I didn't have my good pencils with me, and I'm just dealing with cheap version right now. Now you might have seen I made the lighter part here. I didn't mean to do that. I'm just going to fill that in. But the lightest part's going to be around here. So I won't overlap that again for a while. And I'm just slowly trying to overlap the darkest part. And the more I turn the paper and fill this in through a series of crosshatches, it will start to, the line marks will start to go away, and it will start to kind of become more tonal as the shape fills in with graphite. I will say this is kind of one of the more meditative things to do. I hear students behind me. If someone knocks on my door, I might have to ignore them. I'm not going to do this again. Now, so you can kind of see I have a really general basic value application here. I haven't really touched here. I just hit that with one layer. You can eventually, it will look like this. But before I go any further, which I should have done already, but I'm just going to apply some tone to the shadow itself. It's going to hit the whole thing with one even tone, right? And then I'm going to hit it again, because if you will see here, the shadow is a little darker right around the edge. So I might want to start to create that right now before it's too late. And if you look at shadows, typically they kind of fade out from dark to light as they get further away from the object. So I'm just going to try to fade it out a little bit, but not too concerned about it. Now I've established that for the moment. Now I'm going to go back into the sphere itself, and I'm going to just start to build layers and layers, overlapping layers and layers. And this is how you do a rendering. It just so happens I constantly hit this area here. I don't know what's happening there. This is printing paper, and I may have had sweaty hands, and that could be my fingerprint from before. Who knows? Hopefully it doesn't become an issue. Now I got this nice base down. That's basically what you're doing in the beginning. Just using a hard pencil, like a 4H, a 2H, depending on the brand that you have. You're putting a nice base down. And after you get that base down, then you can really start to push the values a little bit darker in areas, but you're just doing this slowly. It's a slow transition of value. You can kind of see that I'm being kind of hesitant up here, but I'm trying to create a highlight. Ideally, I want the highlight here. So I might just fill this in and just try to create the highlight here. And then I'm going to try to hit value up around that, just so that becomes a little highlight. It's kind of getting there. Again, it's subtle. Now this does look like monotone at the moment, but I can start to apply a value again at the base, or close to the base of the sphere, the area where it should be darkest. But if I hit that too hard, too fast, too soon, that would determine everything else. And it's kind of hard to make that soft transitions here, because you can kind of see it gets darker, it slowly gets lighter. Same thing here, it gets dark, but it slowly transitions into light. And if you don't layer correctly, you could lose that ability to make that nice transition. Once you get to this stage of it, it's kind of, this is the fun part. It's time consuming, but it starts to kind of come together. Notice I've been hitting this bottom part for a while now, and it's starting to kind of fill in. It's becoming a even tone where the pencil lines are starting to disappear. Not that pencil lines are bad, it's just I'm trying to do a nice fine-tuned rendering and I'm doing my best to eliminate the pencil marks as much as I can, so you can just kind of see the soft transition of value. And notice I've been using the same pencil this whole entire time. Two reasons: I don't have another pencil handy. And the other reason is you can get pretty far with one pencil. When it comes to the point where you can't apply any more value, that's when you start, or when you can't see a difference of value being applied, that's when you jump up to another pencil. So I'm basically right down here. I'm at that point where I could step up to another pencil. But since I have one pencil, I'm just going to make that my darkest tone. And I won't hit up here anymore. But this does look monotone at the moment. I'm going to hit underneath here, and that will pop that bottom out a little bit more clearly and help create more contrast and eliminate a sense of monotone. Now, one thing you just try not to do is go in the same direction all the time, or don't overlap the same direction. Constantly turn the paper, because otherwise you're gonna, every time you overlap the same mark, it just gets darker and it's difficult to get that mark out of there. So you just want to keep going in different directions. You'd be surprised, even though you can't even see the layers built up right now, there is subtle differences happening. You can already tell that it gets darker here. This is the highlight. The light source is kind of coming from here. I possibly made a mistake. I could have pushed this over to the left more because the shadow gets further out. But I can always adjust the shadow. I can make this smaller here if I wanted to. It's not the end of the world. Just going to try to get this a little darker. Trying to get dark down here, but I'm trying to transition it into the reflected light. And the whole thing about this is the gradual transition of value. That's super important. If it looks like it's graphic, you can clearly see those transitions. It's not as effective. Sometimes with a hard pencil, you can just kind of go over areas. If you just want to make that slightly darker down there, which I'm trying to do, you can just kind of go over those areas and hit both sides without doing any harm to either. Now I'm just going to hit this one more time below, and I kind of wish I had a softer pencil. It'd be easier for me to do so. Also be wary that you don't have texture underneath whatever you're applying. Now I will say the shadow edge gets harder as it gets closer to the form, and then it starts to fade out here. So that little outline that we put there before, and if you want, you can kind of lighten it with a eraser of some sort. It's not ideal, but kneaded eraser would probably work best, and then you can kind of just fade this thing out. So it looks like it just kind of fades out into the night. So if you look here, the value's built up. and you really can't see the pencil, the directions of the pencil lines at this point. So that's kind of what I mean by a rendering. And if you want, you can also get a neat eraser or something and lighten this up and blend it in again and kind of work it out. But that's basically it.